So this panel is going to be on corporate renewable PPAs. We will actually expand corporate into sort of non-traditional, non-utility off-taker to also include municipal load, buildings owned by city, county governments, and similarly other public institutions like universities. So my name is Dan Seif. I'm Managing Director of Grid Economics. It's a newly formed consulting firm. My partner in this endeavor is Chad Levin. Some of you may know. We both formerly worked at the Butler firm. We are a market insight consultancy supporting regulatory affairs, investment strategy, business development activities for clean energy businesses. The panel we have here today is very solid, so I want to thank the TREE organizers for putting together the team here. From my, or your left to right, we have Hans Royal from Renewable Choice Energy, TJ Emoyan from Texas Energy Aggregators, and Jessica Adkins from Bracewell Law. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a bit here, but I wanted to lay the foundation for the panel just for a couple minutes, if I might. Previous to my work at the Butler firm, I was a solar lead at a think tank known as Rocky Mountain Institute, based primarily out of Colorado, where I launched an initiative called the Business Renewable Center, focused on corporate, large-scale renewable energy deal-making. And at the time, it was sort of in its infancy. Google had done several very landmark deals. Some universities had also done some similar deals. And by deals, I'm talking about virtual PPAs and physical PPAs. But there was clearly a need to educate and support the transactional space for corporations. And so the Business Renewable Center that I founded, and I'm here representing them, they're still my client in my consulting practice for the last 2.5 years or so, now has about 55 corporate members, most of the largest corporate names in the renewable energy space. For instance, Walmart, Pepsi, J&J, Bloomberg, IBM, Facebook, Goldman Sachs, Owens Corning, Lockheed Martin, Marriott, et cetera. I'm not going to name all 55, but I think you get the gist of the significance of this transaction space now to corporations. The Business Renewable Center also has over 100 sponsors from the supply side, so pretty much every major renewable energy developer and many of the best known intermediaries, accountancies, law firms, transactional support companies. So I'm very happy to see where this industry has grown, not just in members of a resource center like the BRC, but actually in transactions. Prior to 2012, there was about 0.5 gigawatts of deals done. It basically exploded through 2015, 5.5 gigs, 5,500 megawatts of deals were done. In 2015 for wind, that exceeded utility deals. So there was more non-traditional offtake than traditional. 2016 has been a little bit of a slump. I think we're looking at more like 1 gigawatt, and we can talk a little bit about that, but still a gig is more than all transactions in history prior to 2012 and prior. So there's now about 30 corporations that have transacted in this space, so we're beyond the GAFAM, the Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft that does a lot of very aggressive sustainability actions, but into deeper Fortune 2000 and even industrials, Corning, Owens Corning, others, semi-industrials like Lockheed Martin, et cetera. So it's definitely an expanded field. It's a very exciting field. Texas leads this market. 40% of all such deals are in Texas. So this is big money, big megawatts, and a very interesting story for Texas. I think I'll let the panelists now tell us a little bit about themselves, their business, and their activities in the space. And let's kick it off with Hans. I think that's on. You might want to tap
Yep. Hi. Hey, everybody. I'm Hans Royal. I'm Associate Vice President at Renewable Choice Energy. Renewable Choice is based in Boulder, Colorado. We've been around since 2001, and our core business is to make it easier for all organizations to embrace renewable energy. So we've been actually selling renewables, started out actually going door to door, literally selling RECs in 2001 to households. And as you can imagine, in 2001, no one knew what a REC was or what wind was or anything. So really been kind of in the forefront of helping move the renewable energy industry forward for specifically the voluntary buyer. So we don't deal with utilities, we don't deal with policy or anything like that. We just focus on corporations and companies that want to adopt renewables. And traditionally, it's always been more expensive to do so, but we've been selling it anyway. We say, wait, there's environmental benefits, there's reputational benefits, there's stakeholder benefits. Also, you have fixed price of power, you have cost certainty. You're going to pay a lot more for renewables, but here's all the reasons why you should do it. That dynamic has shifted in the last few years, and now renewables are cost competitive with fossil fuels in many areas, especially in ERCOT. So it's really helped our customers be able to embrace renewables in a much larger way and to sign long-term commitments like power purchase agreements, virtual or direct, and we can get into that a bit. In a way that makes sense for their bottom line and makes sense for their reputation and so forth. So it's been a really exciting time for us in the industry and for our clients. We're an intermediary, so we don't develop projects. We sit in the middle between developers and the corporate buyers, and we sit on the corporate side of the table to go out and find the best possible projects for them and help them structure these deals, because a lot of these corporates are not energy buyers traditionally, right? It's outside of their core business, so they use folks like us to understand how to transact at the lowest risk and lowest cost to get the best price for themselves. So that's a little bit about us.
DJ?
I'm TJ Ermoyan. I'm the president and founder of Texas Energy Aggregation. We're based out of lovely Waco, Texas. Is there anyone else out here that works in the broker space? Broker, aggregator, consultant, maybe more in the consulting space. I'm usually always in the minority at whatever conference I go to, because the brokers channel, they're focused on getting deals, selling deals. And they're usually doing deals that are simple. We do 20, 30 deals a week probably with commercial and public clients. And those deals are normally pretty easy to get done. We do a lot of them. So trying to get the brokers to come along and start selling renewables, it's complicated. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more moving parts. It's a lot harder to sell. So right now, the brokers are not motivated. Recent statistics I saw, somewhere between 60 and 80% of all the commercial deals done in the state of Texas are facilitated by an ABC, an aggregator, broker, or consultant. A little bit more to give you an idea about my company or background. We started out as a one-man shop going just door to door, helping people right after dereg in 2002. And after near 15 years of doing this now, I wouldn't say this in a room full of my competitors, but we manage about 5 gigawatts of load, the largest chunk of that being public customers like the state of Texas. It's been a challenge trying to get into the public space. I have 2 goals really today and really this year. One is to help facilitate adoption of renewables amongst the public sphere, and then to help you all be successful. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of risk takers, a lot of smart people in this room. I've said many times, I'm never the smartest guy in the room, but I can usually identify them and get them to go to work for me. So those people make me look good. My job is largely to dumb things down, because it's human nature. What we do is very complicated, and it's our human nature. If we're confused, we make no decision rather than a poor one. So my job is to dumb things down for those decision makers where they feel comfortable, they feel like they can trust us because of our reputation in the industry, and then just be a customer advocate and facilitate all these things. So we've got some great challenges ahead. I think after the election this week, we're not gonna be able to rely upon as much government support as maybe we have in the past. So we have to be cost competitive, and as long as we can show customers how to do this, I think there's a great opportunity out there for the whole industry. It's really exciting to see some of these numbers and to see all the different people that have come together. Texas is a great opportunity, and I'm excited to be in it and look forward to working with each of you all to make those things happen, especially in reaching these public customers.
Thank you, TJ.
I'm Jessica Adkins. I'm a partner at the law firm of Bracewell, where I've been a partner there for I've been there for 15 years. Bracewell is a global law firm. We focus on energy. I would say over 70% of our total revenue is focused on the energy space. Then within the power sector, we have about a little over 50 attorneys transactional attorneys that dedicate their time to this space. And within that, we're really doing all the so we're doing M&A, project finance, commodities work, et cetera. I personally, I say, do almost 100% of my work in the power sector. I spend a large amount of my time on what I would call commodities and structured finance deals. Within that, I would say anywhere from the large hedge deals that you're seeing to the PPAs, both physical and financial. Within the Texas market, I've done probably 1,500 megawatts just of the hedges, another, probably over the past couple of years, about 2,000 megawatts of PPAs and hedges, including some of the large corporate deals and including both synthetic and kind of your traditional PPA. So I would say my role in this space is really to think through structuring these deals and try to help our clients come up with solutions where they can achieve their goals and help them do that in the most efficient and painless manner possible.
Great. So I think the way we're going to run the panel this morning is we're going to do a little Q&A here led by myself, but we're also going to flash up after that some polling questions, which you can vote by text, little fun audience participation dynamic, and we'll talk about the results that you're providing and our views on them, and then after that we'll open it up to just sort of general Q&A. So right before I get into my portion of the lead Q&A, I just want to make maybe a baselining explanation. So you're going to hear a little bit about virtual PPAs and contract for differences, which are basically synonyms. Physical PPAs, which are what I would really call virtual PPAs using the official transaction system of the power markets, because nobody actually directs green electrons to your factory. You're just using the official transaction system of SPP, MISO, ERCOT, virtual PPAs are side contracts. The project still settles with the market like it might do on a merchant basis, but you have a side contract that equilibrates the pricing as if you had a fixed priced physical PPA with them. And then ISDAs, or bank hedges, which again are basically synonyms. I think ISDA is what? International Securities and Derivatives Agreement? Swaps. There we go. Which is basically a virtual PPA the way banks like to do it. Is that a good? So you have three offtake contracts that we'll be talking about here. Virtual PPA, which is physical PPA, which is basically virtual but official. Then virtual PPA, which is the side contracts for differences. And then ISDA bank hedges, which are basically virtual PPAs the way banks like to do them. So with that ground level explanation, I also want to thank Chris Foster and Neil McAndrews from the first panel. They did about 20 minutes of explaining offtake for Georgetown. Georgetown's a municipality, not a pure load, because they're a municipal utility. But much of that explanation, I think, is relevant to this panel as well. All right, so kicking it off with the first question, I'm interested in the panelists' view on what will it take to open up virtual or physical PPAs to the next class of large non-traditional off-takers, so corporations, universities, municipal load. We've gone from the big branded tech companies, now we're at about 30 companies, and it's still in sort of the late stage, early adopter phase. What's it going to take to dig into, true blue, unbranded industrial, for instance, and other kinds of off-takers that aren't participating today? So maybe we just take this, what would that be? clockwise, and next time we go the other way? Yeah. Great.
Yeah, it's a good question. So you're right in saying that over the last few years, some of the early adopters are really the tech industry. It's Google, it's Facebook, Microsoft, and so forth, Amazon Web Services, and then really the consumer-facing brands. Recently, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, some of the more household names. But I am actually seeing in our business and then outside of our business a further diversification of the types of companies doing these deals right now. I can tell you from my own client base, I have some industrials that you guys may not have, are not household names, or that don't really have an environmental goal even, and are looking at the economics and the fixed price of power. So I think it's happening, but the challenge is around education, because again, these long-term PPAs with renewable energy projects are fundamentally outside of most of these companies' core business. And so education is the number one, I think, hurdle of why we're not seeing an even faster adoption of these. But it's coming. I think I would guess that we'd see actually more than a gigawatt in 2016, just based on we probably have half of that, or 75% of that coming before the end of the year, just in our company, and we of course have competitors out there that do the same type of consulting we do. So it is coming, and I think the diversification is happening. Groups
Hans,
like
quick additional question on that. For instance, Owens Corning did a large, what was it, solar deal in Texas? When I think they might have executed a deal prior and it wasn't published. So I'm wondering how many of these kinds of deals are actually getting announced.
Yeah, they're all going to be announced, I think, at some point. But as you can imagine, a company that signs a PPA may have to wait 12 to 18 months before that wind farm actually gets built. And so some companies decide not to announce before COD, before the commercial operation of a wind farm, because they don't want to take kind of that construction risk, right? If you announce a deal and then something happens to that wind farm, that's not good for brand reputation. And so a lot of companies have signed deals that I know about that have not been announced yet publicly either.
Thanks.
Yeah. So anyway, so I think the last thing I want to add there is just that there are the industry organizations like the BRC, like WWF and other groups are actively sharing information and trying to create a community, and in the corporate PPA space, information sharing, unlocking that information sharing and exchanges between the developer community here in the room, and what do you guys need to finance your project? Okay, how do you get that education out there to the corporates is super important, and is going to keep helping unlock sort of these deals for the next sort of subset of corporates that will be doing it. But the Fortune 500 is big, and I think 250 of the Fortune 500 have environmentally related goals. So it should be something that most large companies look at.
All right. Obviously, TJ, this is your representation here for the sort of the non-corporate, not other to non-traditional class. So your perspective, I think, on that's going to be pretty key to this audience.
Well, as promised, I'm going to dumb things down in case it gets too heady in the room. But nothing happens till somebody signs something, till a customer signs a piece of paper that says we're going to contract for this load. So that's where the rubber meets the road. And not only do customers not understand virtual PPAs, but most of them don't understand PPAs. They don't even understand electricity. Fortunately, that's why I have a job, is the ability to come in there and make this palatable to them to where they feel like they get it. Now, when you get into public customers, it's a little bit different. The decision makers, it's never one decision maker. It's one guy that's the engineer that actually understands how this stuff works, but he's not the guy who signs the check. And the guy that signs the check is not the end decision maker. And then the end decision maker could actually be a board or a committee, and it just takes one confused person to derail the deal. So these things get extremely complicated. However, in government, there's no incentive for these guys to get the best deal. What I normally find their attitude is this: don't make me look stupid, and don't get me fired, and don't make my job more difficult than it already is, which we don't always have to get them the best deal, but if we can make them look good, and then at some point there's an elected official that they ultimately report to, and if we can make that elected official look good, then everybody has a job and power starts flowing.
Yep.
The one great thing that we can do with renewables is you have that official with a photo op in front of a solar array. And one great thing is I said people don't understand electricity, but suddenly it becomes more tangible for them when they can actually reach out and touch where their electricity is coming from. And they can say, we generated this right here on site. That's exciting for a lot of the public customers.
TJ, maybe one particular question or sub-question in this, what does it take to get the next generation of off-takers in? For you is the budgetary restrictions or the potentially legal restrictions for doing long-term commitments for city governments, for instance. Could you explain the issues and where that's going?
It's one of the struggles we've had that as this industry is evolving, there's new challenges that nobody ever thought of when they put out an RFP that says the largest state agencies in Texas have to use this RFP. So we've won the contract for the state of Texas. If there's a better rate out there, I'd love to know about it, but we locked in a deal for TxDOT, sub 3 cent per kilowatt hour rate, and it was a 100% renewable contract, which that's the bragging rights, but we all know that it was done with PPAs and generated a lot of it with conventional power. But for them, that was a major coup. Now, it was a short-term contract. I believe we can get those kind of rates if we can get long-term contracts done, but people are in the state realm or governmental realm, they're not risk takers. So we have to provide a clear directive for them. The state has to provide some sort of a directive that says it's okay to sign a 25-year deal. But right now that nobody's ever seen one. So nobody's told them they can, but they hadn't told them they can't either.
And that last detailed question, I believe Houston recently executed a deal. How did they overcome that long-term budgetary challenge?
You'll find it's easier with cities and counties, school districts than it is with the state customers because they report to the state comptroller or ultimately the governor. Okay. So we're working that end in the legislature. I've worked on some other consumer legislation, so we navigate that fairly well.
Okay. Jessica?
So the question was, what does it take to get the next generation in? Okay. Well, I think it depends on what we're talking about. So I think obviously you have to have folks that want to go green. So I think that the first structure we were talking about was actually getting in place a long-term PPA that's actually going to incent new generation. Because if you want to go out and buy RECs, if your goal is just to say that you're going out, if you're buying green energy, I think that's really easy for people to do right now. And right now, from a marketing perspective, the Federal Trade Commission guidelines really, in order to claim, if you really, all your goal is to claim is that you're buying renewables, is you can, as long as you can offset your usage with renewable energy credits, that's really all you need to make that sort of a claim. I think where the Amazons and everyone else is really going is you hear the buzzword additionality all the time, which is what they're wanting to do more than just be able to say that they're going green. They want to actually be able to tell their customers that they're creating and putting new renewables on the grid. And so I think what you need actually in order to make that sort of a structure work is going to be, it's more of a challenge for these smaller ones because a lot of them just don't need as much generation. And so when you're looking at financing a 50, 100, 200 megawatt project and everyone wants a 10 or 20 megawatt slice, that just gets complicated. And from a financing perspective, what you need to have is you need to have a credit-worthy off-taker. So there's all sorts of different legal structures that you could put in place, but at the end of the day, you have to have some sort of a core group that's going to get the banks comfortable that are lending, that there's going to be somebody there that's going to be able to make the PPA payments in order to service the debt. So I think from that perspective, it's just kind of how do we, from an aggregation perspective, I don't know, maybe someone like a TJ or a Hans that actually has access to those markets and can aggregate them. But it's, if you're a developer, I don't think it's your first choice to do a deal with those, with 10 people when you could do a deal with one, because it just makes it more complicated from a legal perspective.
I'll ask one more question in this general Q&A period, and maybe, if you don't mind, slightly brief answers so we can move to the polling. But on a local basis, we're just miles away here from Austin Energy's territory, and not too long a drive from San Antonio's territory. Virtual PPAs have been executed over a gigawatt in SPP for load that is within a retail monopoly. So they're not getting a physical PPA to their doorstep. So why do we not see more transactions maybe settled at the CPS load zone, settled at the Austin Energy load zone for corporate load in those territories? Because what I hear is, well, we're serviced by Austin Energy CPS and the reliability, and it has no effect whatsoever on reliability. That's a non-starter. So it's a side contract. It's a contract for differences. It's the same thing for all the folks up and down these mid-plain states and SPP that have executed these virtual PPAs. So now I've kind of disclosed my opinion on why there's an issue here. Quickly, I'm wondering if you could address where we are on that.
And I'm sorry, it's why we're not settling at the...
Why are we not seeing virtual PPAs, contract for differences, for facility loads that are in CPS and Austin Energy territory? Because long-term, they're basically exposed to the ERCOT market at the load zone.
Well, just when we talk about physical and virtual, I think fundamentally you can accomplish the same thing either physically or financially. I think in ERCOT, you definitely don't see as many virtual because you don't have the regulatory hurdles necessarily that you have in other jurisdictions. So Texas, ERCOT, as we all know, is not FERC jurisdictional. So you don't have to go get your market-based rate authority, et cetera, with FERC. And so in Texas, it's much easier to become a power marketer. So what I've seen just from a physical versus financial perspective is clients are saying, well, it's really pretty easy to be a power marketer in ERCOT. Like, why don't I just take it physically? I think that they're not really seeing a huge difference, and the regulatory drivers in Texas are not necessarily the same as they would be.
They can't take it physically because they're bound in these. They don't have a retail electric provider because they're not in the fully deregulated Texas territory. That's kind of the catch-22 is what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Maybe I think Hans.
Yeah, I have a thought on this. My short answer is they are looking at it right now. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. The question is, how closely does Austin's electricity rate actually correlate to Austin load zone on your retail bill? Because if that lags, so let's say power markets go down to half of where they are today or whatever, how quickly will that show up on your electricity bill behind Austin's retail territory? And if that tracks relatively well, wholesale to retail, then you can do a virtual PPA and essentially have that effective hedge for your load behind Austin's regulatory area. It just might have a lag of a couple months. And so that's what corporates are mostly looking for. So first of all, if you get into a good deal and it's virtual, then you're going to make money. So if you're buying a commodity at below market rates and you do a virtual deal, you're in the money regardless of what you actually spend through Austin Energy or through your utility. But the other benefit that people are looking for with these long-term deals, like Georgetown, right, is cost certainty and a hedge. So the hedge, measuring the hedge effectiveness, if your load is behind a regulated entity like Austin or CPS, has to do with, does your retail rate that you're being charged by Austin track with wholesale markets? Because the PPA is inherently going to be a wholesale deal, and then you're looking at your retail bill to see if those things are correlated. And if they are correlated, at least, and we just did a deal recently. This is not in ERCOT. This is in MISO. That we found an actual 7-month lag between Minnesota Excel's rates and Minnesota Hub in MISO. But the 7-month lag is fine because it's a 15-year deal. And so if market prices go up and in 7 months you're going to spend a lot more on your utility bill, you're going to make a lot more on your virtual PPA. It's just going to take 7 months to kick in.
I think what I'm hearing is it should be done, and it's not that much different than MISO and SPP deals.
Totally.
Okay. TJ, real quick, you've got state load in Texas, in Austin, energy territory. You do have the budgetary constraints we just talked about, so maybe that's first and foremost before you can even get into this conversation. But do you have a perspective on load in Austin Energy and CPS territory on this particular item?
Well, I'm guaranteed I'm going to say something to upset somebody everywhere I go, and that's okay because I like to stir the chili. But if you're in Austin or you are in Georgetown, if their city council makes a bad decision, when I say bad decision, if they try to prognosticate and they lock in a deal for 20 years and then the price cuts in half 2 years from now, it's like, oh well, we're going to pass that along to the ratepayer. And I've always loved that term because in regulated areas, they don't even call them customers. They're ratepayers, which is like running a restaurant and calling your customers eaters. The eaters are here. We have to feed them. So it's, if they make it may be years before we know how good a decision we actually made. So when you're working in the corporate space, those people have to compete. So they're used to taking risks and doing these things every day. In the case of working with state clients, they're probably the least risk averse. But what we are selling is budget certainty. I can look at the Texas prison system that they've had 300% volatility in their rate over the last decade. So if we can remove that volatility and give them some budget certainty, that's a very positive sell, even if it's not the cheapest rate out there.
So with that, I might switch over to the polling questions, because the first question is kind of the audience's version of what TJ was just discussing. So if you don't mind queuing that up, or I don't know, do I hit forward arrow, or let's see. Okay, guess I'm not in control here. Okay, so the first question up top there in the blue, what are the greatest obstacles facing deal completions right now in Texas?
Can I vote?
Everybody can vote, yeah. There's so we've got, I think, 5 options. Sorry, had to condense the options at some point. Lack of urgency, kind of a why now issue. Low power market prices, natural gas is low, as are power prices. Understanding of process, TJ's talked to that at length. Understanding of value by off-takers, again, an understanding and maybe also a fundamental value question. And job function, which again, TJ talked about, is this a risk to my job? Is this really in my purview? If I do 2-year deals, why should I even be considering 15, 20 years? So if you could vote with those text numbers, I think we'll see some real-time results. This feels a little bit like 2 nights ago, with numbers changing rapidly and unexpectedly. All right, I'll let those accrue for a minute here.
Dan and I had a conversation outside a little while ago. We were talking about the job functions of power buyers. If it's the guy's job to buy real-time index power or short-term deals or heat rates, suddenly if you lock in a 20-year deal, what's he going to do for the next 20 years? So a lot of times it's a function of job security, just like in the public realm that people don't like taking risks, because in my job I get asked what are power prices going to do, and a friend of mine that's a stockbroker said never predict what's going to happen in the future, because if you do it correctly, people will just think you did your job, and if you do it incorrectly, they'll never forgive you. So I try to put that off onto the customer.
So we're getting the early statistically relevant results in here. I guess I'm not seeing the numbers shift anymore. So it sounds like maybe natural gas is the major bugbear for higher volume deals in Texas in the short term here. Any thoughts on that, Jessica or Hans? Or the outcomes all told here from the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a very low price environment, and I think with the election results, you could think that gas may remain low for a really long time, and so that poses a challenge for corporate buyers who are looking to renewables to be competitive. I mean, in December, just this last year, $1.60 natural gas, right, a year ago ish. That translated to super low ERCOT prices, and anyone who had done a virtual PPA or a direct PPA prior to that and was buying wind at $30 a megawatt hour or 25 or 20, they were losing money in those months, right? And so if that continues in the future, it's a tougher argument.
So maybe ask Jessica about that. I mean, are you on this low power market price outcome from the audience, related also to Hans' statement, are we hearing grumpy buyers, those who've executed in the last 3 years? Are they making some of their discomfort known now?
Well, I've typically represented the sellers or on most of these deals, but yes, I mean there definitely are folks that entered into. I mean, I'm talking to some of my sponsor clients who are telling me that when they locked in a price 2 years ago, the projects have just come online, and some of these, you do a synthetic PPA and you're not basically not getting power, and you're just cutting a check to the project every month. So I think that's something hard that's hard for some of the folks in the accounting groups at these corporate buyers to get their arms around, and so that's a little bit of an uncomfortable place to be.
Great. So I might tee up the next. Well, actually, I don't know what the order is. Was there a question before this one in the deck? Okay, maybe we'll do that one for the last question. Okay. Numbers. Putting numbers to your predictions for the next year or so. So, if you're right, you're doing your job, I guess. If those of us who are market predictors, this one says, how much capacity in sort of non-traditional off-takers, so corporates, city buildings, universities, should we expect to occur in Texas in 2017? And as a guidepost, there's been about 2.5 gigs to date in Texas, 40% of all deals nationally, and about 1.5 gigs over the last 2 years, which might be moving up towards 2 with some deal completions we'll hear about soon, hopefully. So please cast your votes in that.
What's the number that we ran in?
I think there's supposed to be text options. Let's see here. Text Gridnext to 22. Okay, I think we're about to get your text question. So maybe you guys can give your thoughts on that before we get the technical issues worked out.
So I think wind's getting pretty saturated in for virtual PPAs. I think solar is coming on strong, but not in 2017. So there might be a little bit of a lull in 2017 compared to last year and this year. Just when you look at rates and power prices and some of the biggest deals. Oh, okay, so all right.
All right, so voting is live. Let's see.
Yeah, I won't give you my number, but I'm going to text it in.
All right.
I think he's going to be some of the public adoption governmental entities that if people see the government investing in these things, their city, their state doing this, they're going to feel more comfortable. Being in Texas, we are so energy rich here. I had the privilege of serving with Fred on the Aspen Institute Energy and Policy Forum this summer, and everybody there, I mean, the whole conversation is about carbon reduction. And there's 3 of us there from Texas, and I said, I live right between George W. Bush's ranch and Ted Nugent. Okay, we're in the reddest of the red states. I start talking about climate change in Texas, and most of the people's eyes just gloss over. Not so much in Austin, but we start talking about those things, and conversation's over. But money is the greenest thing that people understand. If we can give them a compelling economic vision and show them, just quantify, here's what you've been paying, here's what you're going to be paying, you put a dollar sign in front of it, and most people are really good at math.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping some of these predictions, the predictive average here comes to the fore. It looks like we're at 1.5 gig, or a little higher maybe on the all waiting there. So, that's a pretty robust market. That's probably more than was done in 2016. So this would indicate an uptick. So, I mean, Jessica, do you feel like that kind of rough predictive transactional volume is what you're seeing with your clients?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, because I'm doing a lot of large deals, and so you do 2 of those deals, and but I just
right.
It's hard for me to say.
So it could be a couple one fell swoops, if that's even a correct thing to say, which doesn't sound like it is, but.
Yeah, I mean, when was it last year or early this year when Google announced 800 megawatts at once? So I don't know how much of that was in Texas, but I think some of it was. So I also really like South Texas wind. I've seen some Houston hub settled deals that are good. I think people are going to get away from settling West Texas and put that onus on developers to deliver it to either North Hub or to South Hub or to Houston Hub. So as you guys consider, if there's developers in the room and you're considering what products to create or what types of projects to look at, I would definitely recommend, if you want to get into the corporate space. I don't know about the municipalities or the city buyers or whatever, but from a corporate perspective, absolutely hub settled, unit contingent, so it's good. As generated, a corporate needs most of them need the unit contingent deals, but as generated, delivered to one of the hubs, probably not ERCOT West Hub, probably North Hub, South Hub, or Houston Hub, and as long as you can compete with current traded values in the shape of the wind, then you have a market.
So I think we're pretty close on time here. Do we have time for one or two audience questions? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So. Open it up to the floor. I don't know. I guess there's a microphone sort of close to the front here, and that's the major question microphone. Anybody?
Let me go ahead and.
Well, I think we may have one. Oh no. Okay, she was looking to facilitate. Okay. Well, go ahead.
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunities. The deals we see getting done right now are happening through the REPs themselves. And we've got kind of an unusual situation that we're sometimes in competition with those REPs. A lot of them, as we're seeing more consolidation in the industry, if you got a NRG, if you're dealing with Green Mountain or Reliant, or if you've got NextEra or some of the other companies out there, Exelon, that are actually generating power, what happens is your deals are competing with their deals. And if the deal gets done by an REP or through one single REP, then they're going to have a tendency to choose their own projects. So competition is good, but I helped form it was the Texas Energy Professionals Association, TEPA. It's now gone nationwide. And I think back about when we started, there were maybe 100 people in the room. Nobody would even give you their business card. Everybody was suspicious of the other guy because they might be a competitor, and I don't want to tell them what I'm doing. And that's kind of shaken out now, where we all get together and share adult beverages and share good information. At this point in your industry, we all can do a lot more working together and sharing information for the common good, because if we have companies that start going bankrupt or projects that go bankrupt, it's going to have a chilling effect across the industry. So I really think we can do a lot more working together.
Okay, last chance for questions. Okay, well, with that, I want to thank Tria and the panelists, and I think we have another panel coming up here shortly. Yeah. So thank you.